Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rechak Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of James, the first chapter. And before getting into the book of James, which this James is dealing with, as it's going to tell you, the brother of Yahweh Shai. Okay, so just a bit of background information here concerning who James was and his role in the church before we get into his writing here. So it says here, James, brother of Yahweh Shai, otherwise known as James the Just, or a variation of James, the brother of the Lord. It says here, was according to the New Testament a brother of Yahweh Shai. James was personally known to Paul the apostle. He was the first leader of the Church of Jerusalem. Traditionally, it is believed he was martyred either in 62 AD by being stoned to death on the order of High Priest Ananus ben Ananus, or in 69 AD by being thrown off the pinnacle of the temple by scribes and Pharisees and then clubbed to death. James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas, and these two, Judas, known as Jude, and James, were the brothers of Yahweh Shai. I mean, well, so was Joseph and Simon, but these two were the ones that were in his ministry, as in they believed on Yahweh Shai. Are mentioned as the brothers of Yahweh Shai, as well as two or more unnamed sisters. All right, I'm going to skip down through this part and get to some of the other parts here. So, leader of the Jerusalem church, it says here, the Jerusalem church was an early Christian community located in Jerusalem. Now, we know that, Peter was really the head, but here James played a prominent role as well, in terms of certain decisions that were made. So it says, of which James and Peter were leaders. The predominant place and residence of James in the city are implied by Galatians 1 and 19. Clement of Alexandria, as recorded by Eusebius, says, Peter and James and John, after the Savior's ascension, though preeminently honored by the Lord, did not contend for glory, but made James the just bishop of Jerusalem. According to Eusebius, the Jerusalem church escaped to Pella, which it says Pella was an ancient city in what is now northwest Jordan, and contains ruins from the Neolithic, Chalcolithic, Bronze Age, Iron Age, Canaanite, Hellenistic, and Islamic periods. It is located near a rich water source within the eastern foothills of the Jordan Valley. So it says the church here escaped there during the siege of Jerusalem by the future Emperor Titus in 70 AD, and afterwards returned, having a further series of Jewish bishops until the Bar Kokhba revolt in 130 AD. Following the second destruction of Jerusalem and the rebuilding of the city as Aelia Capitolina, subsequent bishops were Greeks. Which, these would be Israelites anyway. It says here, James the Just was from an early date with Peter, a leader of the church at Jerusalem. And from the time when Peter left Jerusalem after Herod Agrippa's attempt to kill him, James appears as the principal authority who presided at the Council of Jerusalem. Now, Peter didn't leave, all right, I'm out of here. No. This is referring to the account where after Peter returned, after the angel had delivered him from prison, and he returned to, I think it was Mark's mother's house where they were gathered. Once they knew it was him, he didn't stay there. It says that he left, likely went into hiding or something like that to avoid being found again of Herod. But he was still, we see him in Jerusalem and the different areas there anyway, right? Acts the 2nd chapter and Acts second chapter happened before, but Peter is still mentioned as being there. So when it says here he left Jerusalem, it's not saying that Peter up and bounced, and then James is like, okay, looks like I have to take over. So they could have been clearer with that. The Pauline epistles and the later chapters of the Acts of the Apostles portray James as an important figure in the Jewish Christian community of Jerusalem. When Paul arrives in Jerusalem to deliver the money he raised for the faithful there, it is to James that he speaks, and it is James who insists that Paul ritually cleanse himself at Herod's temple, which this is not Herod's temple, it is the temple, the second temple, which Herod contributed or enhanced, through different contributions, but it wasn't Herod's temple. So it says to prove his faith and deny rumors of teaching rebellion against the Torah. And this is, there you go, in Acts 21. It is this that eventually turns into the Jews being stirred up by those from Asia and then trying to kill Paul. This was a charge of antinomianism or nomianism, which here says it's a term used to describe any view which rejects laws or legalism and argues against moral, religious, or social norms, or is at least considered to do so. In Paul's account of his visit to Jerusalem in Galatians 1:18-19, he states that he stayed with Cephas, also known as Peter, and James, the brother of the Lord, was the only other apostle he met. Paul describes James as being one of the persons to whom the risen Hamashiach showed himself. In Galatians 2:9, Paul mentions James with Cephas and John the apostle as the three pillars of the church. Paul describes these pillars as the ones who will minister to the circumcised, in general, Jews and Jewish proselytes in Jerusalem, while Paul and his fellows will minister to the uncircumcised, in general, Gentiles. These Gentiles were Israelites that were living like Gentiles, otherwise known as Israelite foreigners. After a debate in response to concerns of the Christians of Antioch, the Antioch community was concerned over whether Gentile Christians or Israelite foreigners that believed need to be circumcised to be saved, and Paul and Barnabas and sent Paul and Barnabas to confer with the Jerusalem church. And this you can read about this in the book of Acts, right? Acts the 15th chapter. You had some Judaizers that came there trying to push that, hey, if you weren't circumcised, you couldn't gain salvation. And Paul and Barnabas were not having that. So they went back and forth with them. And eventually it was decided to take the matter up to the apostles in Jerusalem and get a verdict on it. James played a prominent role in the formulation of the council's decision. James was the last named figure to speak after Peter, Paul, and Barnabas. He delivered what he called his decision. The original sense is closer to opinion. James, which really was through the Spirit, James supported them all in being against the requirement that is of putting these all the laws on the Israelite foreigners newly come in, right? Especially telling them that no, you got to be physically circumcised before you can gain salvation. Peter had cited his earlier revelation from God regarding Gentiles, Israelite foreigners, Cornelius being an example, and suggested prohibitions about eating blood, as well as meat sacrificed to idols and fornication. So there were a handful of main, things that they warned the Israelite foreigners that were believing or that were believers to stay away from. This became the ruling of the council, agreed upon by all the apostles and elders, and sent to the other churches by letter. So now, lastly, I just want to read this part here, and this deals with some information concerning James's death. All right, so dealing with Josephus here, It says, according to Josephus in his work Antiquities of the Jews, Book 20, Chapter 9, refers to the stoning of James, the brother of Yahushai, by order of Ananus ben Ananus, a Herodian era high priest. Ananus, who, as we have told you already, this is from the book of Josephus here, took the high priesthood, was a bold man in his temper and very insolent. One who is insolent is, their lack respect, insulting, arrogant. He was also of the sect of the Sadducees, who were very rigid in judging offenders, above all the rest of the Jews, as we have already observed. When, therefore, Ananus was of this disposition, he thought he had now a proper opportunity to exercise his authority. Festus was now dead, and Albinus, was but upon the road. And these were, I believe, they were governors or procurators, some magistrates that were in charge of the region. So Festus was dead. Albinus seems to be the one who would replace him, but he wasn't there yet. So this guy takes it upon himself, Ananus, because as a high priest, there are certain punishments or judgments, being that we were under the Romans. You couldn't issue capital punishments except you had to go ahead from the Romans. Like, you couldn't put somebody to death. So he assembled the Sanhedrin of judges and brought before them the brother of Yahushai, who was called Hamashiach, that is, Yahushai, who was called the Anointed, whose name was James, and some others, or some of his companions. And when he had formed an accusation against them as breakers of the law, he delivered them to be stoned. The James referred to in this passage is most likely the James to whom the epistle of James has been attributed. The translations of Josephus's writing into other languages have at times included passages that are not found in Greek texts, raising the possibility of interpolation. But this passage on James is found in all manuscripts, including the Greek texts. So interpolation, it says here, the insertion of something of a different nature into something else. So basically having things added to it. But as they confirm here, this passage in the book of Josephus is basically uniform across all the it's found in all those manuscripts. So it's just not something that was like added in just one part here and is like infactual. So I'll read this last part here. It says the context of the passage is the period following the death of Porcius Festus and the journey to Alexandria by Lucius Albinus, the new Roman procurator of Judea, who held that position from 62 AD to 64 AD. So that's about 2 years. Because Albinus's journey to Alexandria had to have concluded no later than summer of 62, the date of James's death can be assigned with some certainty to around that year. So that's a bit of information about James the Apostle, right? Brother of Yahushai. And I have here some context, some background information as well on the actual epistle or writing or book of James, and what was going on here, being that he was one of the leaders of the church in Jerusalem. What was actually going on here that inspired or is addressed in the book of James. So it says here, this letter was written to the Jews scattered everywhere. That's in James 1:1, and evidently to Christian Jews. Some of them were rich, some poor. They were lustful, greedy, and proud, and were omitting to do the Lord's work as they should. So you have to keep in mind that, yes, you had believers, but having the faith in the Lord comes with newness of life, which actually means that you may have had certain people that, coming from the world, had certain characteristics or habits or traits about them that may not have been ideal. So in these writings by the apostles and that we read in the New Testament, it wasn't just about, okay, believe on Yahushua, but then there was the nurturing part. Okay, here we're hearing reports about believers that are engaging in activities that are not that are not showing forth fruits of the Spirit, and they need to be addressed. So it was the cultivation, right, as well as you plant, but you also have to cultivate, right? You have to address certain issues that are going on in the church in the different areas, that need to be handled. So it was the labor, was more than just, oh, I'm just gonna go preach here. You hear the word, you believe, and then I call it a day. They were also, placed upon them was the responsibility of making sure. That was the point of having an elder or a bishop of the church or leaders of the church, to make sure that the church was growing in the right way. The epistle, the chief characteristics of style is abruptness. Change is made from one subject to another with no effort to connect them. There is therefore no general subject and a lack of close connection between the points of analysis. So here, they're basically saying when you read the book of James, it's like it's like if today we did a lesson, right, and we just titled it various topics, right? So in the lesson, you'll have, like Apostle Tahar says, lessons within lessons. And that's kind of what goes on here in the book of James, right? In one chapter, he talks about something, then he goes into another topic, then another topic here and there. But it's like a various topics kind of lesson that we would do. So unlike, the book of Corinthians or First Corinthians, right, or Colossians or Ephesians, where you're like, okay, Paul is specifically addressing this kind of that's going on here. Like, that's like when you see a video that has a specific title on it, and it's like, okay, it's specifically addressing this or going into this topic. So that's what they're saying here. The book of James wasn't like that. Faith without works is dead flashes in every section of a sort of bond of unity. It is eloquent, stern, and sincere, and has a distinct Jewish tone. It lacks the doctrinal emphasis found in Paul and states the Christian faith in terms of moral excellence and instructs them in the subject of Christian morals. So here in James's writing, right, they're saying here that it's not like if you read in some of the Apostle Paul's epistles, he's grounding like, okay, this is the doctrine of Yahushua, and you go into the law here, this proves this, and this is why we do this. This is why he's our high priest. Like, what he's saying with this writing of this letter of James, it's he doesn't go as deep into that, right? He sort of keeps it on the level of maintaining, a moral excellence, right, a righteous mindset, and being subject to, the general principles of being a believer in Yahushua. It is notable for its omissions, so not like emphasizing or even going into certain points that you see in later writings. It does not have the resurrection or ascension and only mention Hamashiach's name twice. Now, given, that's the case, but that's only, say one writing here that we have of James, right? That's not to count what the things that were being preached, and all the other labors that were done, but fair enough. This is a commentary on this specific book of James that we have. So date and place of writing. So it was no doubt written from Jerusalem, where he was pastor, that is James, but the date is much disputed. Some put it as early as 40 AD. Others, among whom is Dr. Robertson, say it was written not later than 50 AD. Still others put it about 61 or 62 AD, just before the martyrdom of James. It is probably safe to say it was one of the very earliest of the New Testament books. Cool. So that gives us a nice setting here leading into the book of James. Let's get into it. This is the book of James, chapter 1, verse 1. James, a servant of God and of the Lord Yahushua Mashiach, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. Right? You notice he mentions the 12 tribes. So he was addressing this to Israelites, all right, that were, as he said, scattered abroad. My brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. So there are times when, you go through certain trials, otherwise known as temptations. And when you go through that, most of the time it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like it's something fun. But be joyous in the fact of what it's actually accomplishing when you go through it and you overcome it. Knowing and understanding that these trials are for your faith, right? And when your faith is tried, even though it doesn't feel nice, it's working or, developing patience within you. Let's take a look at that word, patience. So it says here, steadfastness, endurance. In the New Testament, the characteristic of a man who is not swerved from his deliberate purpose and his loyalty to faith and piety by even the greatest trials and sufferings. So when you are tried, it works and builds perseverance, endurance, steadfastness, all right, and a unshakable loyalty and faith. And that's the benefit of falling into these temptations or being tried. But let patience have her perfect work. See, so don't be, too antsy when you're put through certain trials. Allow that patience, allow that to have her perfect work, because at the end of it, as he says, that ye may be perfect and entire. It brings you to this level of spiritual maturity, right? This hardened, it calluses your righteous mind. So when you go through other things in the future, you're much stronger. You're much, more stern, in the sense of unwavering, wanting nothing, right? Lacking nothing. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God that giveth to all men liberally. So the Lord gives it freely. You just got to ask for it. And upbraideth not. And let's go into that word upbraideth. But the Lord is not going to, insult you or, get mad at you or rebuke you because you're asking for wisdom, right? To reproach, to revile. That's not going to be the case. Yahushua already told us, whatever we ask of the Father in believing in the name of Yahushua, we will receive, and it shall be given him. See, so if you find that you lack wisdom, you want to grow in wisdom, you want more knowledge, whatever it is, even more faith, ask. Yahushua said, ask and it shall be given. Ask the Lord, and he'll bless you. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering. See? So when you ask for something of the Lord, you have to believe that the Lord is actually going to do it. Not being half and half or unsure. For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. Like when there's a storm, like a very crazy storm, like if you were actually on the ocean, the way the wind is blowing, the waves, and they're crashing into each other, and basically those waves are being blown left and right by the wind. And that's what you're like when you are wavering, right? You're not steady. For let not that man think that he shall receive anything of the Lord. Because if you go to the Lord to ask for something and you don't believe that he can do it, or you don't have faith, don't expect it, because he ain't going to give it to you. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. So somebody that is like, you're not fully committed. You're playing hopscotch, right? You're jumping in, then you're jumping out, then you're jumping in, then you're jumping out. You're unstable. You're not reliable. Okay, one day you'll say yes, the next day you'll say no. One day you're serving the Lord, the next day you're in the world. The Lord does not deal with that. Let the brother of low degree rejoice in that he is exalted. And the one of low degree is one that is of a low status, right? Maybe poor. But rejoice that in the Lord you exalted, you're raised up. But the rich, in that he is made low. Okay, and the rich here, because the point James is making here is that in Yahushua, when you come to serve the Lord, remember we read that there were some that were rich, there were some that were poor. The poor are raised up and the rich are brought down, meaning they're humbled. And why is he saying let him rejoice, right, in that he is made low or that he is humbled? Because if not, you would continue on because those that are usually rich are of a certain mindset, right? And without that humility, that can actually end up being more detrimental to their faith. So it says, because as the flower of the grass, he shall pass away. So understanding that, your riches don't make you invincible. You're just like everybody else. And eventually you're also going to die. Just like, as he describes, the flower of the grass. Eventually you're going to also lose those riches. You're also going to die. Verse 11, for the sun is no sooner risen. No sooner is just saying the sun rises, right? The sun rises with a burning heat, but it withereth the grass, and the flower thereof falleth, and the grace of the fashion of it perisheth. So you can have a beautiful flower, like, I mean, it's amazing. It looks so good, but eventually, as it says here, it's also subject to the heat. And under certain conditions, it'll all that at one point it may have all this splendor, but it also perishes, and loses that, just like a plain looking grass, right? We're all subject to death. So also shall the rich man fade away in his ways. See, so your riches will not be able to save you. Your salvation is not based on your riches; it's based on the Lord. So don't get proud, but rather be glad that in Yahushua you can be made humble. Verse 12, blessed is the man that endureth temptation, right? So when you're tempted and when you're tried and you're able to make it through and endure because it makes you better, blessed are you. For when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life. See, so when you're tried and you endure and you come out on the other side, you're going to receive the crown of life, which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. And that's the crown of eternal life. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, meaning God does not tempt with evil, neither tempteth he any man, but every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lusts and enticed. So what he's saying here is, yes, you'll go through trials, but the Lord does that to test like your faith, your patience. But this is talking about, don't say like, oh, there's a woman that is married and you're like, damn, Lord, you tempting me right now. The Lord is not tempting you to go and commit adultery. That tempting, as he says, is coming from your own lust, all right, and your own flesh. See, the Lord, don't blame him for them kind of temptations, because he tests your faith, but sin really comes when your own desires take control, right? When you start to lust after things, that's when those kinds of temptations come through. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. See, so as it says, when lust hath conceived, when conceived is like if a woman gets pregnant, right? When you allow that lust to formulate in your mind, what it brings forth, or what it bears, like if it was a child, is the actions of sin. And what happens with sin, as it says, when it's finished, the outcome of that is death, because the scriptures tell us that the wages of sin is death. Do not err, my beloved brethren, right? So in that, stay on the right path. Don't go astray. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, and cometh down from the Father of lights, which is the Most High, with whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning, meaning that the Lord is not unstable. Okay, variableness is changing. He's not changing. He's stable. He's the scriptures tell you that in the book of Malachi, right? Likewise, neither shadow of turning. It says, of his own will begat he us with the word of truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. See, so it was the will of the Lord that he begat us, all right, or we were reborn with the word of truth, that we, as it says, should be a kind of first fruits. That's your first fruits are like when you plant the first of your harvest, that's likened unto your first fruit. So if the Lord planted the word of truth, the first fruits were as James is saying, us, the first believers. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. So be more ready to hear, right? As the scriptures say, than to give the sacrifice of fools. So listen first, understand. Don't be so quick to talk. Don't be so quick to get angry. For the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. Yeah, the anger is not lead to the righteousness of the Lord. If anything, it leads to the opposite. Wherefore lay apart all filthiness and superfluity of naughtiness. All right. And let's go into that word. We know what filthiness is, but let's go into that word. Well, let's look into it anyway. And then also superfluity. So it says here, filthiness, yeah, to make filthy. Basically the deeds, look, put dirtiness morally, right? The deeds of the flesh that make you unclean in the eyes of the Lord. So superfluity says here, abundance, remains, right? Residue, the wickedness remaining over in a Christian from his state prior to conversion. So James is saying, put that aside. You know, that is a part of the old man. The superfluity, the superfluity of naughtiness, right? The wickedness that was a part of the old you, put that aside, and instead receive with meekness. With meekness, which is humility, the engrafted word, which is able to save your souls, right? So basically, receive with humility the engrafted word, which is the word of truth, right? The gospel, which is able to save your souls. But be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. Okay, so as he's saying, you know, you know, don't be it says what? Be ye doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. So when you hear the word, don't just, you know, oh, I just heard it, and then no, you actually have to take action, right? Because what's going to happen is, if the Lord, for example, if the gospel, a part of it is don't take the mark of the beast, you hear that, but when it comes, you actually take it, right? Then you're not performing the things that you were taught, and you're deceiving your own self, thinking that, oh, well, knowing is just enough. No, knowing is only half the battle. If the scriptures tell you, okay, these are the things you have to do to serve the Lord, yeah, I hear that, but you don't do it, then what is the benefit of you? For if any be a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like unto a man beholding his natural face in a glass. Here, James uses the example of a man beholding his natural face in a glass is you looking at yourself in the mirror. So when you hear if you're a hearer of the word and not a doer, it's like looking at yourself in the mirror. Verse 24, for he beholdeth himself and goeth his way. So you'll take a look at yourself, and then you'll go and do what you want to do, and straightway forgetteth what manner of man he was. So then immediately you forget what you look like. And so he's using this example to say that, you know, hearing the word of the Lord without obeying it is like briefly glancing at yourself in the mirror and then immediately forgetting what you look like. Because what's going to happen is, when you hear the word and you just hear it, you don't do it, it's not going to stay within you. You're not going to bear any, it's not going to stick with you, right? You're not going to bear any fruit of that. Verse 25, but whoso looketh into the perfect law of liberty, which we have through Yahushua, and continueth therein, right? So the perfect law of liberty is committed onto you through the preaching of the gospel. So when you actually take the time to look into it and understand what you're a part of and continue to grow in that, he being not a forgetful hearer. See, you're not one who just hears it and then, oh yeah, whatever. No, when you put your hands to the plow, when you get your hands dirty, it sticks with you because it becomes a part of you, not just something you heard. So he being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this man shall be blessed in his deed. So in the actions that you end up taking as from hearing, you're going to be blessed. If any among you, or if any man among you seem to be religious, the word religious goes into like, like one that is of the appearance of like a worshiper, right? It says here, fearing or worshiping God. So he says here, if any of you seem to be religious and bridleth not his tongue, you don't control your mouth, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain. So looking at this in the NLT, it says, if you claim to be religious but don't control your tongue, you are fooling yourself and your religion is worthless, because the scriptures tell you in the book of Proverbs as well that basically life and death lie in the power of the tongue, roughly paraphrasing. Pure religion and undefiled before God. So he's saying, but rather pure belief and that is undefiled before the Lord and the Father is this: to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. So when you actually take the actions to show forth righteousness, right? When you help those that are in need and you abstain and keep yourself away from the wickedness of the world, that is the pure and undefiled religion before the Lord. And that brings us to the end of the book of James, the first chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Racha Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.